how can students succeed in my class? I would tell students that to succeed in my class, and this doesn't go for everyone, I appreciate the discussion style class. So I'm not a big PowerPoint person. Maybe I should keep that off the record. Just kidding. But I don't like PowerPoints. I don't really float there. For me, the classroom experience is about having that discussion. So much of what we do in communication studies, at least, is talk about philosophy and society. And for most part, these students are very connected to like society. They're connected to the media. They know it better than me, probably. So for me, having the discussion in class is more meaningful, because as communication scholars, we're chasing this idea of like what is meaning and how people ascribe meaning to certain situations and life experiences. So by having the class share their values with each other in an open, safe space, it makes the class meaningful. And that's what I'm chasing. So students who want to be successful in my course should look to have that discussion, look to be willing to have the conversation, go to places that are kind of difficult to have, but this is the place to have those conversations, whether it's about race or gender identity. These are the places to have those conversations. I mean, additionally, obviously coming to class, I think there's like the usual, like coming to class and reading is obviously a great way to be successful in any course, I'd say. I was always given some good advice just to be nice and approachable and friendly. So students who come into class with a positive attitude, I gravitate towards, and I spend more time talking to them, and it makes the whole class environment that much better. So, I really just expect my students to come with an open mindset and a positive attitude, and that's the most I could ask for, or, at least setting off the class. Intangible skills I would like my students to have, or at least leave the class with, is this idea of just being an open-minded person who's willing to have the conversation with people, is willing to perspective take. A lot of times I get students who come in, they are maybe, stuck in their ways, or they're unable to sort of notice how other people are living. And I think as a communication scholar, we look for people to be to be able to take perspective and to perspective take. It's an incredibly valuable skill. I mean, we are dealing with such an incredibly diverse population just here at Clemson, let alone in the United States. And we're in a society that is valuing people's identity more than ever. But the unfortunate thing is some people are stuck in older ways or singular mindsets, or it could just be as simple as they haven't been exposed yet. So what I like to do in my class is introduce them to larger perspectives, to be honest with their thoughts, but also consider other people's opinions. Again, like coming with like an open mindset and a positive attitude is so big, and it goes beyond the classroom. It could be just going to your family with an open mind and a positive attitude at the dinner table, or walking into your first internship. You're stressed, you're having a hard day, maybe you're upset, maybe you're angry, but the ability to just take a second and be positive and smile and be present, it goes so far. People leech onto the nonverbal communication so quickly, and the nonverbal communication, the first impression of nonverbal communication happens before anyone even opens their mouth. So I think students who come into my class and they look like they're distracted or upset or have something else going on with their life, I like to pull them, not necessarily pull them aside, but like I like to talk to them and see what's going on. And I think that's really the most, like, on the intangible side, is what I can ask for, is just being in that present moment and being kind and being open. Yeah, I like to make connections with students. I think students are our biggest asset. I love networking with students. My goal is to get students' names down and remember everyone by name. I think it's tougher with masks because it's just hard to see faces, and like the distinguishing factor of like people's faces. I'm a face person. I'm not as good with names. That's why I challenge myself. So the biggest thing I like to get out of the class, though, is just networking. I love keeping in contact with students and hearing their success stories and seeing what they do afterwards. For me, that motivates me as a teacher and as a lecturer and as like a faculty member here. Seeing the impact that I have on students is invaluable, and it motivates me to do more. But if we don't keep a connection with our students, and we will never find that out. And I think having that networking ability as a faculty member with our students is important for making the classroom feel like a tight-knit community also. Like, if we don't get to know our students, why should they feel like they have to know us? The classroom is a habitat. So if we don't all know each other, then I don't know what's going to interest you, first of all. So second of all, I want to be friendly with you and have that connection, because you're the product of this class, whoever it is. So I want to see what you do afterwards. That's the exciting part. You've made it through the class. Now I want to see what you do with it. It's definitely easier in person. Just that nonverbal, sharing that common space makes it all easier. Being online was hard. I still got to know students, but it was much more dual motivated. The student had to be motivated to meet me, and I'm motivated to meet students, at least I think I am. But part of it is the student also needs to be motivated to take that extra time to get to know me, which is normally more difficult because it can be intimidating, or maybe students think it's awkward or unnecessary. But when you're in the classroom together, like, you share all that time. So the time leading into class discussion, the time leading out of class discussion, the tangents, all this builds this sort of identity that we have together, and it makes it easier to have that relationship. But you can make it happen though over Zoom. It just takes a lot of extra effort and also a motivated student. I don't even know if I would call it a skill because I'm not that good at it, but one thing I picked up was my brother lived close to me in Alabama. So I was in Alabama for quarantine, or for the first part of COVID. And he was needing a haircut really bad. And I have a pair of clippers, and I was like, let me give you a haircut. And I took some persuading, but eventually he gave in because his hair was just getting too long and there was no one open to cut his hair. He finally gave me a chance to give him a haircut, and it went over well enough where he let me do it a few more times. So I'm not going to say that I'm anything more than just like a very, very early on barber, but I can give you a haircut that you can wear into the public if you are someone who likes short hair. It's such a funny question. So how do I feel about living in Clemson, the surrounding areas? It's great. It's really great. I'll just start off with that because it seems like I'm going in a different direction. It's great. I really like the area. It's a little bit more quaint, we'll say, a little bit tighter and a little bit more quaint than I was in Tuscaloosa, which may be surprising to some people. Tuscaloosa felt like a wannabe city, and I don't mean that mean. I just mean I think they want to be more like a city. Whereas Clemson feels more like a smaller town community, and I like that feeling. Obviously I really enjoy being here. I was excited that I was even given the opportunity to be a faculty member here. The students are incredible. Everyone's so smart. It's like I feel like I walked into a classroom of very highly motivated, intelligent people. So, and I'm not taking a knock at any of the universities that may or may not have been at, but I will say Clemson students are excellent students, and they've made the experience that much better by walking into motivated classrooms. So that makes the experience. The coworkers have been amazing. Everyone's been so friendly and helpful. One of the highlight events that I've gone to so far, because I've only been in town since October 11th or 12th. Oh, not October, sorry, August 11th or 12th. So I haven't even been here a month. But I went to one of the men's soccer games on Friday, and it was a great experience. I have a couple of soccer players in my class. I get motivated to go see my students play. So I went to the soccer game, and no offense to University of Buffalo, but we weren't winning any championships at the time. And then at UA, obviously, we're known for football and softball and gymnastics, but obviously football just takes this huge precedence over the world. And I think football does that here too, but there also seems to be a really generous spread of interest in all the sports here, which is nice. And so my fiance and I went to the soccer game on Friday. It was packed. It was an awesome experience. The guys tore up USC, and that was a really fun experience. I felt like I had my collegiate indoctrination by going to the game and learning the fight songs. Or I don't even know if you would call it a fight song, but the Clemson chant where it goes CLEMSO and then they have a space. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I'm the guy where they're saying N right after O without a space because I don't know what's going on. So then I was head down in the sand. But
yeah,
it's been great. It's been great. Cool. So it's funny transitioning from teaching and teaching all day to research.
Yeah.
So the research interests that I have are around identity and fan identity and how fans interact with athletes. Something I've always been interested in is what do fans get from athletes when they have these interpersonal experiences with them. So much of sports communication, to no fault of sport communication, because this is where technology is and this is where our society is, everything is digital. But so much of the research is mediated based on social media, online experiences, that I think we not necessarily lose touch, but we don't really realize those moments that we have in person are so important as well. And I think about the times that I've had run-ins or interactions with athletes in person. They're so memorable. They're so memorable, at least to me, and I think that for a lot of people too. And part of my research that I look into is also how like fans sort of like gravitate towards athletes. So I'll talk about two research projects that I've completed. The first one talks about identity structure and how it's geared towards incoming leagues and maybe players that aren't as well known. So I was interested in I like lacrosse. It's like one of those sports that I kind of get into along with like hockey that may be a little bit more niche for Southerners. But I really like lacrosse, and I wanted to do a novel project on the Premier Lacrosse League that just started a few seasons ago. And the idea behind the project was, how do fans develop a fan identity to teams that are brand new? They don't have a name yet. They don't have a city. They don't have there's nothing going on with these teams. They're names. And eventually, obviously, these teams draft players. They have identities. They build color schemes and mascots. But it's like, how do fans gravitate towards teams when you really have no direction? And the biggest thing for this league is that they've grown. When I started off, they only had 6 teams. Now I think they're at 8. The biggest thing for this league is that there is no names. There's no geographical location ties. So it's not like, for example, one team is called the Whip Snakes. They're supposed to be like based off lacrosse movement or stick movement. So one team is just called the Whip Snakes LC, but it's not called like the New York Whip Snakes. It's just Whip Snakes LC. And part of the sort of experience of this league is that they don't play in one centralized location. Over the course of like 14 to 16 weeks, they travel the nation and play at neutral sites. They only repeat their location like once or twice. And otherwise, I mean, they might be in the same state a few times, but they might only repeat singular location once or twice. So again, like I have these thoughts of, how are people building their fan identity? We read and research that it could come from parents. Fathers are a huge guidance when it comes to sports teams, siblings. We talk about friends, and then we talk about like how athletes sort of fall into that mix. A lot of times though, most of the times, this research is based around established teams. So like, how do fans grow into teams that have been around for decades? Or how do fans grow into teams that have been around for championships that parents and generations have already been interested in? So at this point with this research, parents weren't really able to navigate where they wanted to go to like their children because they couldn't navigate for themselves. It's a brand new team. So what I wanted to see was, how are fans connecting with these teams when there's really nothing to connect to? And the answer was the athletes. The athletes were the big connection point for fans, and it was done through a few different avenues. A lot of times players or fans would follow players based on the college they went to. Some of these players did have previous professional experience in a different league, so maybe they were followed from another league. Another times it was like a quasi-geographical tie. So this project really stemmed from me being a lacrosse fan, and this one team in the PLL called the Chaos LC. They had 4 or 5 players that either were from Buffalo or played in Buffalo in the National Lacrosse League. So I just like kind of naturally gravitated towards that team because I was like, oh, this is like Buffalo's team. Mm-hmm. We have Buffalo players. That's my team. And I still root for them, even though some of these players are gone now because trades happen, players get picked up. But that's how I started my fan identity, was basing where the players on the team are coming from. And that happened a lot with what we saw. So I think like that sort of like novel fan identity research is really interesting and has a lot to give. The other part of the research that I've done is through my dissertation, where I studied how positive and negative interactions in person with athletes guide fan identity to maybe like a positive, negative valence. And how does that affect people who may already have established fan identities? What we saw was largely that there's not a lot of negative experiences, which is great. We don't want to hear about people having negative experiences with athletes, but a lot of the positive ones like went so far and beyond like a neutral interaction, we'll say, or like an interaction where maybe you just like nod a head at someone or you give them like a wave. People were talking about how it transformed their life, how like it transformed their identity as a fan. And those types of meaningful interactions, kind of how we were going from the beginning of the conversation when we talked about creating meaning, these athletes are able to create meaning in this very brief moment. I mean, some of these interactions were 30 seconds. Some of them were a little longer, like 10, 15 minutes. But when we're talking about in the span of a lifetime, we're talking about a thin slice, a flash in the pan. So to have those quick positive experiences and to hear them be so influential to people was something that I was interested in, and I was really happy to see in the dissertation. So moving forward, I would like to continue studying interactions between fan and athletes on an interpersonal level. I think that's something that not gets pushed to the wayside, but not is necessarily in the aim of the sports communication field. And I'd like to talk about more about identity, but I have like other research ideas too, like beyond sport, but I'm just not sure when to unleash on the world. The advice I would give to a student in my class, and this is going to sound selfish, is to buy in. And I don't mean to sell out. I mean to buy in and be a part of the class. If the professor or the instructor is corny, go along with it. Have fun with that person. Like, be there for them, you know, enjoy the class. It's not all about being cool or acting smart. It's just about being in that moment and just living in that moment and enjoying it and taking it in. Because if you're coming with that positive attitude and that open mindset, like kind of how I mentioned earlier, you're not even going to realize that the instructor is corny or is being silly or is like very intense. You're just going to be there in that moment and take it for what it is. So my advice is to go in there, appreciate the different characteristics of the professors that you have, appreciate the courses that you have, try and get as much as you can from them, and think about how this is going to help you in your future. Because I really think that every communication class in this department, and really any communication class across the nation, teaches some level a soft skill that is going to help someone. And you don't get the questions in comm classes like, oh, like what is learning advanced trigonometry going to do for my life, you know, when I get past high school? But I could say with pretty strong certainty that communication courses do go that extra distance, and students may not realize it right away, but I think it's something that they come back to. So the advice to the students is you're here anyways, you know, whether you paid for it yourself or someone else got you here, like be in that moment, eat it all up, take in as much as you can and enjoy it and learn something, and be an open-minded person. Go in there and talk to the professor, make those networks, make those connections. I'll end with a piece of advice that I got from a friend of mine that was a bit more tangible, but I've always done it since I heard about this. So I was in high school, and at this point I lived in Florida. I moved around a lot, but that's for a different interview. I lived in Florida and had a really close friend of mine who I still talk to this day. His name is Anthony Barcina, and really good dude. He works in the political realm now. He was in the Army before. He's had a really crazy life, and that like he's just gone and experienced so much. He's Cuban, so he's got this like other angles of this diversity, and just someone who's been around. And he went to college in New Mexico at first, and he came to me and I was like, how's college? And like, tell me all about it. You know, like you're like that sort of like eager high schooler looking for, you know, what it's like on the other side of the fence. And he goes, introduce yourself to every professor you meet. And I was like, seems like it's going to be embarrassing and hard or intimidating or scary. But when I went to college and I started my first semester at the University of Buffalo, I went up to every single professor that I had and introduced myself to them. And it took 30 seconds or less, probably less. I said, my name is Sam. I'm in your class. I'm looking forward to a great semester. Thanks. And that's it. And all of a sudden, just by like the magic of that sort of introduction, like professors and instructors, whoever it is, they'll notice you. They'll look at you. You're not a number anymore. You're part of this class. You're a member of society. Like you've broken the fourth dimension. You are no longer just student A or whatever your Clemson University ID number is. You're a person in this class. And I think it's important. We see so many students, we have so many people come to us, and we're just overwhelmed in everything we do in our lives. So having that person make that extra effort to introduce themselves to us, it makes it so nice. And I remember as a student, like there was so much social benefit from it. I was able to approach professors afterwards for information. I was able to talk to them more about projects and assignments without feeling concerned or intimidated. A lot of times students come up to me and it's the end of the semester and they're asking for advice. And I'm like, I hardly know you. Like you never gave me the time or the chance to really get to know you. And I look at students and I'm like, next time, introduce yourself, you know, be a part of the class, you know, be a member of this classroom and tell us who you are. Like that's so important. And especially for students who may look at professors as a recommendation letter one day, if we don't know you, it's going to be really hard to write that letter. So make the effort to get to know us, just like I made the effort to know my professors. It went really far for me. Maybe it's easier than others, or easier for some than others. But I think once you do it once, you kind of like get the hang of it. I've never introduced myself to a professor and was shunned by it. Anytime I've ever introduced myself, a professor's always like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And they're usually taken back by it. That's the tangible advice.